Hey there, it's Kat, and this is Brews and Reviews. So today I'm going to be doing my March 2019 wrap-up, and it's actually much shorter than all of the other wrap-ups I've done. Some of the books are considerably bigger than I've been reading, and just in general I didn't do as much reading. I went through like a really big slump. So basically in March I sucked at Readathons. I set out to do 3 Readathons in March, and I read very few books for all of them. I took part in the Irish Readathon, Readathon, and Sequelathon, and I didn't read very much for any of them. So, yeah. So the first book that I read in March is Nevernight by J. Kristoff. And I'm sure pretty much everyone on BookTube knows what this book's about, but if you don't, this book follows Mia Corvair, who basically trains to become an assassin, and she goes to like an assassin school, and it's just fucking awesome. There is something about J. Kristoff's like dark humour and like the banter that I just really love in this book, and I really like the characters and the way that different things work. Mia's abilities are just the stuff of my dark dreams, and yeah, I definitely think if you've not picked this up and you like gory things, because like this does get gory, you know, assassin school, it's kind of what you'd expect, then you should definitely check this one out, because it's so great, and yeah, I love that banter. Can't wait to read the next one, because I hear it's got gladiators in, and like, really? Come on now, that's awesome. The next 2 books that I read are part of the same series, and that is Sword in the Storm and Midnight Falcon by David Gemmell. These are the first 2 books in the Regante series, and I didn't like these books when I first read them. I reread these for the first time in, it's gotta be 13, 14 years now, and they were great. I really don't understand what like young me thought when she read this, because they were really cool. The premise of the Regante series is that it's set in a Scottish-based fantasy world, and the Regante are like Scottish clansmen. They do spend quite a lot of time in other countries. I think the place that they go where there's like a giant war and fighting from the mainland is based on Rome, but don't quote me on that, because my brain. So the Regante are people who are based on Scottish clansmen, and as a result they have their beliefs in Scottish sort of folklore. And there are some really cool elements to this called the Sith, and they're basically like mythical creatures of folklore who basically everyone says stay away from them because only bad things will happen. There is this one that appears as an old woman most of the time, and she's like supposed to only appear when someone's close to death or something like that, and she's really cool. I really like the sort of relationship she has with the main characters. The first book in this series follows Conovar, who still does make the stupidest decision I've ever read in a book, but you know, whatever. But apart from that, he trains to be a warlord, and he trains to defend his people and unite them, and there's a whole big thing about him becoming like I'm trying to air quote king sort of thing, and it is really good and clever how it's done. Midnight Falcon follows his illegitimate son, whom is sort of ostracized from him, and gladiators. There are gladiators in this book, and it's so cool. It has a combination of the war that Conovar was preparing for, and I just really enjoyed it. Particularly the fact that everyone has this thing called a jiatsu, which is basically a prophecy on how you will die. So like, one of the prophecies are if you kill a dog that bites you, then you'll die, sort of thing. So I find that really interesting because it really influences how a lot of characters think. But anyway, I've rambled enough about David Gemmell now. I'm going to put this down. I really enjoyed these, really glad I reread them. The next book that I decided to reread this month was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So, as we know, Mistborn, beloved series on BookTube, and I loved it. I remember exactly why I gave this 5 out of 5 stars the first time I read it, because it was so good. I really like all of the characters, the side characters particularly, and I can't wait to see how they evolve in the next 2 books. Obviously, I'm sad about major things that happen in this book, but you know, I'm never getting over that, so. This one takes place in a fantasy world where the villain won many years ago, and there is like a ruling class and a lower class who are called the Scar, who are very belittled. And certain members of the society have what is known as allomancy, which is a control over metal. And the ability to absorb the metal, and they sort of have a power based upon which metal they are able to absorb. There are some members of society that can actually absorb all the metals, and they're known as Mistborn, hence, you know, the name of the series. Anyway, great book, really loved it, definitely check it out if you haven't. These two books counted for both Readathon and Sequelathon, and they are Fragile Eternity and Radiant Shadows by Melissa Marr. These are the third and the fourth books in the Wicked Lovely series, and I'm so glad that I reread them. Right, so this is a Fae series. I won't tell you too much about them, but it's basically centered around different Fae courts and how they exist in the mortal and the Fae worlds. I won't say too much about them, but at this point in the series, Bananak the Fae, who is also known as War, and obviously likes to encourage war, is starting to grow more power at this point in the series, and she's causing some havoc. So book 3 actually takes place in Fairy, with the High Queen herself. It's more her storyline. Now, the High Court was never something that I really enjoyed when I read this series at first, but upon rereading this, I actually understood a lot more of like the feelings behind High Court Fae, and I'm like, yeah, actually, you know, I'm more interested in that, and I have a new appreciation for this book. Also, Seth, one of my favourite characters, is in this book, so I enjoyed it. Now, on to Radiant Shadows, which is, I think, my second favourite book in this series. I haven't reread the last one yet, so I don't know if I could say that that one tops it or not. But this one has a lot of focus on Dark Court Fae, and as I've mentioned before, I love me some Dark Court. I really like Annie and I really like Devlin, who are the two main characters of this, and they come into contact with a lot of the other characters. Eerie, who was one of the main characters of the second book, is very prevalent in this book as well. You know, I love him, but this book just slightly kills me as well because of some things that happen in it. But still love it, still really glad I reread it. And this series will forever have a nostalgic place in my heart. So as part of the Irish Readathon, I picked up this giant floppy thing because it contains some poetry by Oscar Wilde. I wanted to read some, so I did, and I actually enjoyed it. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't really get poetry. It's never really been my thing, but it was alright. It's poetry. I know, don't come for me because I am some sort of pleb that doesn't understand poetry that well. So I enjoyed reading it. I like occasionally picking up something that I wouldn't usually reach for, and this definitely counts for that. And also it was older than me, so that was another challenge ticked off for that. I also picked up Volume 2 of The Umbrella Academy by Gerard Way, and I didn't enjoy it. Sorry, stomping on my own parade. I really enjoyed the first volume, but then when I picked up the second one, the tone of it just really didn't sit right with me, and I think I can credit that mostly to the characters of Hazel and Cha-Cha. Now, I hated Hazel and Cha-Cha in this. They were just too much, like, too quickly. There was no character development there. While I really usually like that sort of character, I don't think they really were enough before they started doing terrible things. So it just felt mean. It was like mean-spirited, and I didn't like it. Like, their introduction, one of the characters that they're talking to says, oh, yeah, you'd have to chop off my arms and legs to find out what that recipe is. And then it's just this sweet, chubby little man, and I'm just like, why? Why? Don't know why, just really, really didn't like it, and it put a sour note on the whole reading experience for me. I feel like it could have been much better. Didn't like it. On a side note, really like Hazel and Cha-Cha in the series, so for me the series did a way better job with them. No, let's watch the series instead, please. The last book that I read this month was for the Irish Readathon, covered a couple of the different challenges. That was Blood Loss by Alex Barkley. This is a thriller. Obviously I did not realise that it was the third book in this series following FBI agent Ren Bryce, but you know, that's my bad. Anyway, it was really good. I actually really enjoyed most of this book. I found it really interesting that the main character of this book has bipolar disorder. I don't know if it's a good representation. I don't have enough information on bipolar disorder to actually really discuss that. But one thing I really like is when people with bipolar disorder and other things like that are just represented in books, and they are able to do their jobs and they're able to go about their life. While maybe they are affected by this, especially because Ren has chosen to remain unmedicated, I think that's really interesting. But again, you should probably check out some Own Voices reviews of this. The general story of this book is actually really interesting. It's about a girl and her babysitter who go missing, and there's also a string of rapes that are happening, and it delves very much into pharmacare and the use of drugs. So it's very interesting. Definitely pick up more by Alex Barkley. The only thing I didn't like was that occasionally we had some slut shaming going on, which I wasn't a big fan of. So now that you've seen all the books that I've read, I'm just going to go over them in terms of how, you know, I sucked at readathons and the readathons that they were included in. So I've got my bullet journal here because, you know. So read a book by a female Irish writer. Blood Loss counted for that. Read a book with green on the cover. So for that one, the Norton Anthology of English Literature, Sword in the Storm and Midnight Falcon all counted for that, so, you know, I'm good with that one. Read a book that isn't a novel. Well, it wasn't a book, but it was poetry, so that kind of counts. It also counts for read a book that's older than you, because obviously Oscar Wilde is long before my time. The only one that I didn't actually get anything for was read one of the host's favourite Irish writers. I just did not get around to that one. So for Readathon, I only actually read Mistborn and Sword in the Storm. I was planning to read like 7 books and I just didn't get there. It was just a total fail. And then for Sequelathon, so I read Midnight Falcon and Fragile Eternity, which technically were also on my Readathon TBR, but you know, that's fine, because I didn't get to them. I still read the books that I wanted to read. I also read Radiant Shadows, but that didn't count for any of the challenges. The only one that I didn't get to that I really wanted to was Indisputably Doris by Charles Heathcote, and I'm gutted about that one, so I'm just going to have to wait for another sunny day so I can read it outside. That was my March, and I sucked at reading. But I mean, I did read a lot of bigger books in March, so does that count as something? So if you did any of the readathons that I took part in and you did any better than I did, please let me know. I mean, it wouldn't be hard. Yeah. Anyway, if you like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!